I sat down to make another video, and I had a terrible guitar sound. It was thin, it was distorted. I had to go through some diagnostic work to figure out where in the chain the problem was, and I started going down the line from the guitar to the amp. I checked various voltages to make sure a battery wasn't so low that it was crapping out the sound. But when I got to the bottom of it, it wasn't by stumbling through the dark. It was because of things that I learned that simply are not taught anymore. I completely understand and respect, and it's cool that you can learn anything you want to on YouTube about any subject. I went through a 4-year guitar program. I never received a single lesson about really basic stuff like this. It's not just YouTube, it's a symptom and a problem by and large. And the thing that's frustrating to me is it's really simple stuff, almost so simple it's dumb. Here. That was the issue. As the acronym used to go, BFD, right? Well, here's the reason it is. What happens if you're out on a gig, you don't have another spare cable, this happens to you 5 minutes before you're supposed to go on stage, and you need an answer right then? Yeah, you should have extra gear. Yeah, ideally there's somebody running sound. That probably won't happen to you, but what if it does? I had an amplifier go down at Freight and Salvage because the amplifier was rented. I told them something was wrong with it. We were doing the West Coast. I knew that something bad was about to happen. Nobody would listen to me. The manager for the aspiring artist, who shall remain nameless, wouldn't sign a union contract, resented me for charging scale, and nobody would listen to me about anything. So by the time we got to the West Coast and they'd rented the Hot Rod DeVille, I knew something was wrong and something bad was about to happen. We made it from Seattle down to Portland, down to Berkeley, into Freight and Salvage. I'd been checking the cables and running through the entire board every single night. My conscience was clear. I wasn't going to screw anything up that I could have fixed at the time. We got to Freight and Salvage, played the sound check. Everything was still good enough to fool everyone else, but not me. Started the show, and about 10 minutes in, the guitar sound began to cut in and out. It wasn't the cable. I wasn't into fixing amplifiers at that point in time. That was about 10 years ago. And besides, it wasn't my job to fix a rented amplifier from Guitar Center. Did I mention that there was no band? She didn't want a bass player or a drummer. She wanted unaccompanied electric guitar. So that was already pretty weird and precluded even sticking a microphone on an acoustic guitar to get through the set. Somehow we made it through with sound cutting in and out, got to the end of it. She was upset, said I didn't know what to do, I just wanted to run off stage, and it was a bad experience all around. I took no pleasure in it then, and I take no pleasure in it now. I'm sorry that it happened. If people took this stuff a little bit more seriously, if people in guitar platforms and on guitar YouTube channels were taught the bare minimum about how to diagnose problems and fix them, hopefully everyone would be a little bit better off. So instead of just plugging in the guitar cable and finding a thin sound and going, well, it's the guitar cable, and maybe throwing the old one in the trash, this is a teachable moment. This is what to check for. A guitar cable is very simple. There are only 2 connections. It's unbalanced. Don't worry if you don't understand or care what the difference between balanced or unbalanced is. It doesn't matter unless you're into studio cabling. You have a hot connection that's at the tip, and you have a ground connection that's here on the shaft of the plug. I use the George-L's cables because they sound very good, they have a low capacitance, and I've been buying that cable since 2001 or 2002 at least. In fact, from my college dorm room, I would call over there and I spoke with Kimberly, George-L's daughter. So, the George-L's cable is solderless, but it's true of any soldered or solderless cable. On the George-L's, there's a set screw that screws into the ground connection, and the tip connection, you don't strip the cable, you just insert the cable and press down, and there's a tip connection at the base of the cable. If it's soldered, you would strip away a little bit of the cable, tin the end, go to the hot connection, and then have a ground connection to a different lug. I knew right away what the problem was because the sound was thin and distorted, but it didn't buzz and it didn't have a terrible hum, so odds were that the problem was with the tip connection. When you take your multimeter, you should read close to 0 ohms of resistance between each connection, between ground to ground and between tip to tip, that's hot to hot. Ground of one end, ground of the other. Set your meter to DC ohms for resistance, 0.7 ohms. But then from hot to hot, I'm getting 4.4 ohms of resistance. That's too high. You want to read the ohms, the DC ohms. You don't want to do a continuity check with your meter. If you do that, 4.4 ohms is still low enough in terms of ohms that it will beep. It will make the sound of the continuity. You'll get that with your meter, and it'll tell you that there's continuity, but the resistance is too high. That's the problem with this cable. I'm going to fix it right now. We'll be back in business. The process is the same on each end for George-L's. Just pull away the strain relief, unscrew this set screw, and I'll pull the cable out. Then you insert the cable, press it down. That's forming the hot connection. This is as essential as a multimeter in your briefcase. And I had this on the tour, by the way. That's normal when you turn it on. You're going to see those intermittent lights flash. You need to push the reset to display the proper pattern. And then move the cables around vigorously. If you see the intermittent light flash anywhere, you've got an issue. This cable's fine. We fixed it. I got guitar tone again. So the moral of the story is always check your cables, hold up your end of the deal, have spares, have a kit that you can take around whenever you leave the house that allows you to take care of simple things when you're in the heat of the moment and you have to take care of something then. As a team player, you hold up your end of the deal, you take your job seriously, you do everything within your power to support and enhance the vision and to make sure that everything goes smoothly for everyone involved. But if you're the star, your ego means absolutely nothing, and your manager means absolutely nothing if your ego got in the way of listening to somebody who knows what they're talking about and was trying to warn you, and your head was so big that it ultimately came down to backfire on you and made you have a really bad night. It's not fair to you, it's not fair to anyone else. Don't do it. And once the moment of playing music begins to happen, egos cease to matter. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker were famously rivals and they couldn't stand one another. But when Cream played, it was magical. And at all points as you're learning, don't just look for what you want. Try to get the things that you actually need. A lot of times what you need is not always what you want. And even in the real world programs that charge people a lot of money, or more accurately, most likely their parents, a lot of money, it's easier to say, well, everybody knows that, it's commonplace knowledge, or to write it off as not being important. But as a guitar player, a little bit of basic practical knowledge goes a very long ways. Thankfully, Jim Nichols taught me to use a multimeter. There's an old Bob Dylan quote, keep a good head and carry a light bulb. Keep a good head and carry a multimeter. I'll see you the next time.